Good evening, everyone. I want to talk to you about just to bring you a quick video on Breonna Taylor. How is everyone on today? Um, I just wanted to bring this quick video because it's been 874 days for Miss Palmer. She has been waiting for justice for her daughter. And what's sad about this is that it took this long for them to charge these officers when this incident happened in 2020. And it took that long for them to bring charges against these officers. And so we have to keep hope alive. We cannot give up on hope, no matter how long it takes, no matter how bleak it may seem, no matter, we may think that God is silent, but we cannot give up hope when we're working towards justice and we're fighting against injustice. We cannot give up hope even when things don't go our way and we think that it's obvious that there's injustice going on, there's corruption going on, there's things that don't align, and the evidence is there, or the evidence doesn't line up, but we got to keep hope alive. 874 days of waiting for the officers to be charged in Breonna Taylor's murder. And not only did these officers, put other lives in danger, but they shot through the apartment and it went into another apartment. They violated some constitutional civil rights here. And so I'm going to get into this article. Like I said, I won't be long before you, but it says 4 current and former Louisville police officers involved in the deadly raid on Breonna Taylor's home, including detectives who worked on the search warrant and the ex-officer accused of firing blatantly into her home, have been charged with civil rights violations and other counts, Attorney General Merrick Garland said Thursday. Now, the charges mark the first federal counts leveled against any of the officers involved in the botched raid. In addition to civil rights offenses, federal authorities charged the 4 with unlawful conspiracies. They put conspiracies out here, and we're going to get to that, where they filed fraudulent reports, unconstitutional use of force, because it wasn't constitutional what they did, and obstruction of justice, Garland said. And they did, because anytime you write down something in a report, you file a false police report, or you put false information in a report, you are obstructing justice for justice to be served, at least for them to get to the truth when you put down false information. So Taylor's mom, Tamika Palmer, Miss Palmer, said she's waited 874 days for federal charges to be filed and has beaten everything sent to break her. There has been everything that's been sent to break her, but she hasn't broken. She's still standing. The blood is still running warm in her veins. And we look at so many different cases where there is a violation of, the inmate's constitutional rights, and a violation and wrongful convictions. And we look at these things, and when we go back and see that it took 874 days to bring these officers to justice, that's a shame. It's despicable. But we can't give up hope. We cannot give up, even when it seems bleak and dark. And even if it seems that God is not answering us speedily, we can't give up. Because, see, God is always working it out on your behalf and in your favor. God sees everything and he knows everything, but he takes time working it out to make sure that it's worked out the best and for your good. And so she's saying how she waited 874 days for federal charges to be filed and has beaten everything to break her. Her daughter's death has taken her to a place that we can't even imagine, she says. And that happens when you lose a loved one or a child, and you're not getting the justice that you deserve, and you know that you deserve justice. It can take you to some dark places that nobody could ever imagine unless you've experienced it, and you probably will never understand unless you've been through it. So she says every day's been March 13th for me. See, a parent won't ever forget the day that their child was murdered in cold blood. Palmer said, and now referring, and she didn't say that part. She just said every day is March 13th for me. But Palmer said, referring to the day Taylor was killed in 2020. You can't never forget that. You will not be able to forget when your child has been murdered in cold blood and they're not giving you justice. And it's taken time to get justice. And when we look at things, sometimes, we got to wait it out. We have to wait it out because, because we got to wait on God a lot of times, And so former Detective Joshua James, 40, he's 40 years of age, and Detective Kelly Goodlett and Sergeant Kyle Meany, 35, were charged with submitting a false affidavit to search Taylor's home ahead of the Louisville Metropolitan Police Department's raid. They were looking for notoriety and fame. They wanted to be there first so that they can make a difference and they can make a statement. But the difference that they made is they took away somebody's life. They took away a Black young woman's life that had black curtains up, trying to keep the light out so she can get sleep because she worked nights. And they took that away from her. They filed a false affidavit and to search the home, and then working together to create a false cover story in an attempt to escape responsibility for their roles in preparing the warrant affidavit that contained false information according to court documents. Now, they took the coward way out because they lied. They found false documents, and then they worked together to create a false cover story. And we've been through that where a lot of people will come together to make up a story on someone so to get the public to believe it. If they say, well, like, Gayle King said to R. Kelly during the interview, remember that when she said, well, how come this many women, and she started naming them? That's to get people to believe it. If everybody is saying it, then it must be true. That's called crabs in the barrel, people. That's, people jumping on bandwagons and crabs in the barrel. And we've seen a lot of things in his case that's not true. But let us move on. So ex-detective Brett Hankinson is alleged to have willfully used unconstitutionally excessive force when he fired his service weapon into Taylor's apartment through a covered window and covered glass door. He is charged with depriving Taylor and a guest in her home of their constitutional rights by firing shots through a bedroom window that was covered with blinds, and blackout curtain. The U.S. Department of Justice says, the DOJ. And you know what black curtains are used for? They're used to keep out the light, when you are trying to rest, especially if you work nights and you need that sleep. So you don't want light to enter in. And so, you want to treat it as if it's nighttime in your bedroom. So you use blackout curtains. And so that's what happened. And so the 46-year-old faces charges of depriving 3 of Taylor's neighbors of their constitutional rights as well. According to the indictment, the bullets he fired traveled through a wall in Taylor's home and into an adjacent apartment. What if it had been children in there? In her apartment too? What if kids had been killed innocently because you're firing bullets into a home? What's the purpose of firing bullets into a home? So James and Meany stand accused of willfully depriving Taylor of her constitutional rights by drafting and approving a false affidavit to obtain a search warrant, while knowing the affidavit contained false and misleading statements. Omitted material facts. So they intentionally omitted material facts. They omitted it. And we see that happen a lot today, where facts are omitted, where they don't bring the evidence, or they suppress it, or they withhold evidence back, or they don't even present all of the evidence to the district attorney. And so this is what they did. They omitted material facts. They relied on stale information, old information, and was not supported by probable cause. They didn't even have probable cause to do what they were doing. It wasn't supported. See, when you're going to do something, it has to be probable cause and it has to be supported. And so the DOJ statement said, but both men knew that the execution of the search warrant would be carried out by armed LMPD officers and could create a dangerous situation both for those officers and for anyone who happened to be in Taylor's home, it said. Now, Goodlett conspired with James and Meany to falsify the search warrant for Taylor's home and to cover up their actions. Afterwards, the statement said, okay, and James and another detective tried to cover up their actions by drafting a bogus investigative letter and making false statements to investigators. Now, if that's not a federal offense, what is it? By making false statements to investigators, according to the statement. James falsified a report in hopes of impeding a criminal probe into Taylor's death. So again, impeding the investigation, making up a false statement so that they would not proceed with a criminal probe to see what was really going on and what really happened. Meany also made false statements. The statement said, Goodlet and James met in a garage weeks after the botched raid and conspired to relay false information to investigators, the attorney general said. Now, see, I always say that the truth don't need any help. So if you were telling the truth, you wouldn't have had to have a secret meeting. You wouldn't have had to conspire in a garage with no one else around but you and the other person. You would not have had to do that. And I go back to when these prosecutors sit here and meet with these alleged victims or accusers over and over and over. They meet with them so that they can come up with a statement that they need to make. And if you notice Gloria Allred, any of the clients that she represents, they always got a written statement. Let me tell you something. The truth don't need no help. If you're telling the truth, you won't forget what the truth is, and you will be able to tell your story without a written statement. You wouldn't have to sit down and get a piece of paper and be our book and be looking at it and reading it. You will be able to tell your story based on the truth. And it doesn't have to be written unless you're trying to do a memoir or sell a book, right? Or write the book. So you might read from your book, like when I do the Joyce Myers and the A Cup of Hope, so I do commentary on what's been written. And there's nothing wrong with doing commentary and breaking it down and depicting it. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you are dealing with the judicial system and the district attorney is involved, you and police, you are supposed to be good for the people, by the people, to help the people. And you're up here making up false stories and you're conspiring in a garage so that you can hope that they will, not do a criminal probe, and you can hope that you will impede the investigation to discourage people from moving forward in holding an investigation. But see, this is rightfully so that they did an investigation and proceeded, because Miss Palmer needs justice. Her and her family needs justice. 874 days. And I'm encouraging you to keep hope alive. Don't give up on anything that's been going on that you believe that's been unjustly done. Don't give up. Don't give up on Christ, because he's going to continue to expose everything, because what you do in the dark shows up come to light. And so people think they're untouchable. They think that they're above the law. And so they create all these things and they do all these things. But at the end of the day, guess what's going to happen? God's going to, the next morning is a new day, bright morning sunshine. And he's going to expose people each and every day, because he's working behind the scenes and he's working it out in your favor. And you don't have to broadcast it on social media or on a street corner, because God's going to do that thing, but he's going to do it in his time. So let's get back. So they met in a garage after the botched raid and conspired to relay false information to the investigators, the attorney general alleged. Now, we allege that Miss Taylor's Fourth Amendment rights were violated when defendants Joshua James, Cal Meany, and Kelly Goodlet sought a warrant to search Miss Taylor's home, knowing the officers lacked probable cause for the search, Garland said. See, you see these traffic stops that happen, right? When they lack probable cause, but they make up something. And then if you ask for their supervisor, they get indignant and want to put the cuffs on you and all that kind of stuff when they don't have probable cause. And so the affidavit falsely claimed officers had verified that the target of their drug trafficking investigation had received packages at Taylor's address, but James and Goodlet knew that was not true. Garland said they knew that was not true, but they went along with it because they wanted to be able to do what they were doing, and they had already made a mistake. So they had to cover this mistake up by to keep creating false stories and conspiring together to keep the lie going. See, when you lie, you got to tell a lie one after the other to keep it going. You got to be very creative to lie. But see, when you tell the truth, you don't have to be creative because you're telling the truth, right? And so James apparently virtually from a detention facility, wearing shorts and a polo shirt, entered a not guilty plea. Okay. And prosecutors are not requesting that he be detained pending trial, but they asked that he be prohibited from contacting any possible witnesses or defendants in the case. He shouldn't. They need to, and make sure that he doesn't talk about the case. Make sure a gag order, put that on him, and really, we hope that they don't have a passport, so that they can run off somewhere, flight risk. We hoping that doesn't happen. Now, Hankerson, who fired 10 shots into Taylor's home, and was acquitted on state wanton endangerment charges earlier this year, was indicted on 2 federal counts of deprivation of rights under color of law. Hankerson's attorney declined to comment. Only Hankerson was charged at the state level, but his attorney declined to comment. I wonder why. Because a lot of times they be commenting, they be delusional, they be reckless when they come out and comment. But right now he's probably trying to think of something. He's trying to pretend to come up with something so eventually he can make a statement. And that's something. And so officers who carried out the search warrant were not involved in the drafting of the warrant and were unaware it contained false information, the attorney general said. Now, see, that's just reckless and messy. They didn't know. They said that allegedly they didn't know. Okay, so they didn't know. But that's just messy and reckless because now you got even more of a situation, okay? And then we share, but we cannot fully imagine the grief felt by Breonna Taylor's loved ones and all of those affected by the events of March 13th, 2020, Garland said. Breonna Taylor should be alive today. Yes, she should. And even though we didn't know her, but there was some grief that was shared. I mean, it was heartbreaking to see what happened to her. And even the other people, victims that were, the bullets went through their apartments and their rights were violated. But to see this happen, and it took 800, she said, and 74 days. She's been waiting. Miss Palmer's been waiting. And so a conviction on the charge of willfully violating someone's rights carries a statutory maximum sentence of life in prison when the violation leads to death, according to the DOJ, Department of Justice. A conviction on an obstruction count commands a maximum penalty of 20 years. And the conspiracy and false statement charges each carry maximum sentences of 5 years, the department says. 5 years, okay? 5 years. Now, this is a huge step towards justice. A huge step. This is a huge step. Civil rights attorney Ben Crump, who represents Taylor's family, you know that he came out, and he represents Taylor's family, applauded the charges as well as the tough fight, because it's been a tough fight. And that's an understatement of the fight that Miss Palmer has had to endure waiting for justice for her daughter, okay? And it's waged by Taylor's family, a tough fight. Attorneys, advocates, and community members, a tough fight. And not just by her family, but community, and members, advocates, a tough fight. And that's an understatement. In 2020, Crump and his team secured a settlement that paid Taylor's family $12 million and led to sweeping police reforms, including the use of social workers to provide support on certain police runs, and the requirement that commanders review and approve search warrants before seeking judicial approval. Yeah, there needs to be oversight. There needs to be some type of oversight. And it led to that because you have officers. Not every officer is bad. My late brother, one of them, was a detective, and he was not a bad officer. He wasn't corrupt in any way. And he worked in one of the most dangerous cities, you know. But however, there's got to be oversight when things like this happen. Do you agree? There has to be oversight. So today was a huge step towards justice. We are grateful for the diligence and dedication of the FBI and the DOJ, as they investigated what led to Breonna's murder and what transpired afterwards. See, it wasn't just the murder, but it was what happened afterwards. What happened afterwards. And when you something happens and the shock, when you get over the shock, and there's a lot of pain and suffering and sorrow that goes on afterwards. And it takes time, and you'll never really recover. You'll always grieve, but guess what? You will be able to manage it sooner or later. But how can you manage it when you're not getting justice? But you got to have the tough fight. You can't give up hope. You got to keep hope alive and keep pushing forward when you're fighting against injustice. So the justice that Breonna received today would not have been possible without the efforts of Attorney General Merrick Garland, or Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, Kristen Clark. Crump said in a statement, "We hope this announcement of a guilty plea sends a message to all other involved officers that it's time to stop covering up. Covering up, just like if I take this and cover up my face, it's time to stop covering up and time to accept responsibility for their roles in causing the death of an innocent, beautiful young Black woman, the beauty of color. Another beautiful Black woman murdered at the hands of some corrupt police officers." Because that's what happened. That is what happened. And so Clark said in a statement, "Since the founding of our nation, the Bill of Rights to the United States Constitution has guaranteed that all people have a right to be secure in their homes." Absolutely. Secure in their homes. Free from false warrants. Free from false warrants. Nobody should have a false warrant placed on their address, their place of residence, where they're supposed to be able to find solace and safety in their home. These and it goes on. Unreasonable searches, absolutely. And the use of unjustifiable and excessive force by the police, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. And then these indictments reflect the Justice Department's commitment to preserving the integrity of the criminal justice system and to protecting the constitutional rights of every American citizen. We have got to protect the integrity. And when you have people in office that are supposed to be doing that, it is your job to protect the integrity of the criminal justice system. And we see that that's been going in a different direction. It's been going left instead of going forward and going right like it's supposed to. It's been going left. And you have people in positions that took an oath to protect the integrity of the criminal justice system, and they have failed on every level. And not just in this case, but in other cases, and I'm sure you can name them, in other cases. And so that's why it is important to continue to fight and keep hope alive. Okay. So in January 2021, the LMPD terminated James and his colleague Miles Cosgrove. Cosgrove was fired for his use of deadly force in unleashing 16 rounds into Taylor's home and failing to activate his body camera. Why did he fail to activate it? Because he didn't want evidence. He didn't want receipts. He didn't want them to be able to go back and see that he did that. But he's responsible for turning on his body camera. He's responsible for activating the body camera that they are provided. If you give a camera to an officer, that is part of their job duties to activate it. And he refused. See, we can no longer have privilege under the uniform of an officer that took an oath to protect and to preserve and to serve and be the best that they can be in helping in the right way, not in the corrupt, wrong way, but in the right way. And if you are an officer, you have to stand for what is right. And when you make a mistake, own up to it. Don't be a coward. Own up to it and accept responsibility instead of lying and falsifying documents and making up and conspiring to come up with false statements and stories to file in a report. So this was according to the termination letter that he was given. And so James was fired for failing to complete a search warrant. Failing to complete a search warrant operations plan form. What was your plan? How did you go about it? You failed to do that. You failed to document properly. And guess what? Now you're facing consequences and being untruthful about verifying that Taylor's previous boyfriend, Jamarcus Glover, had been receiving packages at Taylor's home, the termination letter said. So following his termination, James' attorney, Thomas Clay, said the move was not unexpected and promised to fight to have his client reinstated. And he said, it's our position that he did nothing wrong in any of the activities relating to this search. Well, yeah, that's your position. And you can stand on your position. You can do that. That's where you stand as a defense attorney fighting for your client. But that doesn't mean that what you're standing on is right. Doesn't mean what you're standing on has integrity and truth to it. And this is what his attorney, James, attorney named Clay, told CNN in January 2021. How did that work out for you, Clay? How did it work out for you? And so Cosgrove fired the shot that killed Taylor. Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron has said, adding that the shooting was justified because Taylor's boyfriend fired at officers first. See, that's what they said. Remember the story? They said that it was justified. But if somebody shows up at your house and you don't know what's going on and they didn't announce themselves and you don't know, you have a right to protect your home and the people in it. Kenneth Walker II, Taylor's boyfriend, has repeatedly said he thought the officers were intruders and fired one shot when they broke the door down, or when they broke down the door. Co-counsel, Lonita Baker took aim at Cameron following Garland's announcement Thursday, saying the Attorney General has no right holding any political offices representing Kentucky. The federal government had the guts to do what Daniel Cameron did not, she said. A review board upheld Cosgrove's termination last year, and James lost a similar appeal before the board in June, according to CNN affiliate WDRB. Now, the Louisville Police Union said at the time the fires were unjustified. See, there is certainly no evidence in this case that policies and procedures of the LMPD were violated to the extent that warranted termination, is what they're saying. The River City Fraternal Order of Police said in a statement, interim chief Yvette Gentry not only made the wrong decision, but also sent an anonymous message to every sworn officer of the Louisville Metro Police Department. Taylor, a 26-year-old emergency room technician. So she was shot and killed in her apartment during a forced entry raid in the early hours of March 13, 2020. Black people at the hands of law enforcement, including, and they named George Floyd in Minnesota and Ahmaud Arbery, in Georgia, sparked a summer of protests calling for police reform. And you all remember that. You remember that? How can we forget it? Now, no officer who took part in the raid has previously been charged for Taylor's actual killing. State prosecutors only charged Hankinson in connection with the shooting. The LMPD fired Hankerson in June 2020, and in September 2020, a grand jury charged Hankerson with 3 counts of felony wanton endangerment for blindly firing 10 shots into Taylor's home. A jury acquitted Hankerson on all charges in March. And that was then. But things are different now. And so with that being said, leave your comments below, your respectful comments below. Tell me what you think. What are your feelings on this? And do you think it's been too long that Breonna Taylor family, her mother, Miss Palmer, has been given justice? Do you think it's too long? And again, leave your comments below. Thank you for tuning in. God bless you all, and I'll see you again on the next video. God bless you.